Her husband asked her to donate a kidney to his mother. She agreed. 2 days later, he handed her divorce papers. His mistress wore an engagement ring, but minutes later the doctor said, "Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, your own family story channel. Heavenly God, today we bow our hearts before you with gratitude and humility. Please wrap every soul listening in your mercy and light. Pour peace into homes that feel tired, strength into hearts that feel heavy, and hope into lives that are quietly fighting battles no one sees. Lord, I ask you especially to bless every woman in this family. Grant her health that endures, patience that never breaks, and a spirit so strong it carries generations. She is the backbone of love, the silent protector, the one who gives without counting the cost. When she feels unseen, see her. When she feels unappreciated, honor her. When she is tired, renew her. Place dignity in her walk, courage in her voice, and comfort in her heart. Protect the women who pray in silence, who sacrifice in silence, who cry in silence. Reward them openly with peace, respect, and joy. Let no woman in this family ever feel small, forgotten, or alone. Cover her with your grace and lift her higher than her worries. My beautiful family, I speak to you from my heart. I write with love, effort, and prayer because you matter to me. This is not just a story channel. This is a family built on trust, respect, and shared emotions. When you stay, when you support, when you stand with me, you give meaning to every word I write. If your heart is true, like the video, if your love is real, write, "I am with Mr. Peter." May God bless you, protect you, and keep you always in peace. Lindsay Horan learned 3 things in Dr. Okonkwo's office that Tuesday afternoon. Her mother-in-law was dying, modern medicine had no miracles left to offer, and she was about to volunteer for something that would destroy her life in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. "Stage 5 kidney failure," Dr. Okonkwo said, his Nigerian accent wrapping around words that had no gentle pronunciation. He sat behind a desk cluttered with medical journals and framed diplomas, promising expertise that couldn't save the woman sitting across from him. Without intervention, Mrs. Richards has approximately 3 months, perhaps 6 with aggressive dialysis, but the quality of life during that time would be— "How long for a transplant?" Lindsay interrupted. 8 years selling pharmaceuticals had taught her to cut through medical euphemisms and ask the question that actually mattered. She'd sat in enough hospitals, listened to enough doctors dance around terminal diagnoses while families fell apart in real time. Dr. Okonkwo's expression shifted, a flash of something that might have been respect or might have been pity. The National Registry averages 3 to 5 years for her blood type and tissue profile, longer in some cases. She doesn't have 3 years, Ms. Horan. Across the desk, Corbin Richards maintained the posture of a woman who'd spent 30 years presiding over family court. Spine straight, chin level, hands folded in her lap like she was still wearing judicial robes instead of a cardigan that hung loose on her shrinking frame. Even facing her own mortality, she refused to crumble. The only betrayal came from her left hand, which tremored slightly against her knee. Lindsay had watched that hand sign her marriage license 8 years ago, watched it gesture during countless Sunday dinners at the Richards estate, watched it hover over birthday cakes and Christmas presents with a careful distance that never quite became warmth. That hand had never pulled Lindsay into a hug, never squeezed her shoulder in approval, never reached across the space between them to bridge what Corbin clearly viewed as an unbridgeable gap. But it was shaking now, and that tremor revealed something Lindsay had never seen in 8 years. Fear, not of death itself perhaps, but of leaving, of the world continuing without her, of her son facing life without his mother's steady hand guiding every decision. Chris sat beside his mother, gripping Lindsay's hand so tightly her wedding ring cut into her finger. His eyes were bloodshot, face pale, jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. He'd always held emotion inside like that, letting it calcify into something harder than grief, something that looked like anger, but felt like fear. "Test me," Lindsay said. The words came out steady, certain, no hesitation. She felt Chris's hand spasm in hers. Dr. Okonkwo's eyebrows rose. "Ms. Horan, I appreciate the sentiment, but you should understand that compatibility between unrelated donors is statistically—" "I understand statistics. Test me today." "Lindsay, you don't— What if something goes wrong? What if there are complications? I can't lose both of you." "Lindsay, you don't— What if something goes wrong? What if there are complications? I can't lose both of you." There it was. The fear that had been eating him alive since the diagnosis. Not just grief for his mother, but terror at the thought of losing everyone he loved. Lindsay saw it clearly in his eyes, the calculation he'd been making in the dark hours of morning. If she donated and something went wrong during surgery, if there were complications, if the kidney failed anyway, he'd lose his mother and potentially his wife. "Nothing will go wrong," she said firmly, squeezing his hand. "I'm healthy, young enough, strong enough. This is what family does." The word landed in the room like a stone in still water. Family. The thing Lindsay had been trying to earn for 8 years through perfect attendance at Sunday dinners, through learning Corbyn's recipes, through swallowing her pride when Corbyn made comments about career women and modern marriages and priorities. Through 2 years of failed pregnancy tests that Chris dismissed with "maybe it's not the right time," while his mother asked pointed questions about fertility and commitment and whether Lindsay was really trying. Corbyn's trembling hand stilled. She looked at Lindsay with an expression that was impossible to read. Assessment, perhaps. Calculation. Something that definitely wasn't gratitude. Not yet. More like a judge weighing evidence, determining credibility, deciding whether this offer was genuine or performative. "You're certain about this?" Corbyn asked. Her voice carried the same judicial authority it had always carried, even now, even dying. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." That was true, though Lindsay didn't understand yet how devastatingly true it would become. She only knew that her own mother had died of ovarian cancer when Lindsay was 19. 3 months from diagnosis to funeral, no time for interventions or miracles or organ donations that might have bought her more years. She'd watched her mother disappear piece by piece in a hospice bed that smelled like industrial cleaner and decay. She'd watched her father sit beside that bed day after day, holding a hand that grew colder and lighter until it was just bones wrapped in translucent skin. She'd been helpless then. She was 36 now, and she refused to be helpless again, refused to sit in another waiting room watching another family member slip away while she did nothing. If she could save Corbyn, if she could spare Chris that agony, then the choice was obvious. Even if Corbyn had spent 8 years making her feel like she wasn't quite good enough for this family, even if Chris had been withdrawing slowly over the past year, staying late at work, being vague about his schedule. Even if she sometimes felt more like a tenant in the Richards family than an actual member. She'd prove herself now. This sacrifice would finally, irrevocably demonstrate her worth. "The testing can be done this afternoon," Dr. Okonkwo said, pulling up something on his computer screen. "We'll need comprehensive blood work, blood type, tissue typing, antibody screening, infectious disease markers. The results typically take 7 days. 7 days, 1 week between this moment and knowing whether she could save Corbyn's life." "And if I'm compatible?" Lindsay asked. "Then we move to phase 2, complete medical evaluation, imaging scans, cardiovascular assessment, psychological counseling. The donor undergoes more scrutiny than the recipient, Ms. Horan. We need to ensure you're healthy enough for major surgery and that you're making this decision freely, without coercion or pressure." Freely. The word almost made Lindsay laugh. Was any decision in a marriage truly free? You chose to tangle your life with someone else's, to make their pain your emergency, their mother's death your problem to solve. That was love. That was the promise she'd made 8 years ago in front of 200 guests, and a God she wasn't entirely sure she believed in. Chris's phone buzzed against his thigh, once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. He shifted, pulled it out slightly, glanced at the screen. His jaw tightened further. "Do you need to get that?" Lindsay asked. "No, it's just work." "Chris, if you need to—" "I said it's fine." The edge in his voice was new, sharp enough to draw blood. He shoved the phone back in his pocket without answering it. Dr. Okonkwo stood. "I'll have my nurse take you to the lab, Ms. Horan. The process should take about 45 minutes. We're running an extensive panel." Lindsay stood too, gathering her purse. Corbin remained seated, watching her with that unreadable expression. Finally she spoke. "You've always been unexpected." It wasn't praise, it wasn't gratitude, it was just observation, delivered in the same tone Corbin might use to comment on unusual weather. "Is that good or bad?" Lindsay asked. "I haven't decided yet." 8 years of marriage, 8 years of trying to win this woman's approval through perfect behavior and swallowed pride, and Corbin still spoke to her like a judge reviewing questionable evidence. Like Lindsay was a temporary fixture in Chris's life, someone who might be replaced with a better option if the right circumstances arose. Well, maybe this would finally change that. Maybe saving Corbin's life would be the thing that earned her permanent place in this family. The lab was on the 3rd floor. They rode the elevator in silence, Chris staring at the doors, Corbin examining her tremoring hand, Lindsay watching the numbers climb. The nurse who took her blood was young, cheerful, talking about the weather while she tied the tourniquet around Lindsay's arm. "Nice veins," the nurse said brightly. "This'll be quick. You're doing something really wonderful, you know. Not everyone would volunteer like this." Lindsay watched her blood fill vial after vial, dark red, almost burgundy, life draining from her arm into glass tubes that would determine whether she was a match for a woman who'd never quite accepted her as a daughter. Through the window she could see Chris in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear now, speaking in low, urgent tones. His free hand ran through his hair, pulled at his collar, gestured sharply. He looked angry or desperate. The fluorescent lighting made him look older, harder, like a stranger wearing her husband's face. "All done," the nurse said, pressing cotton to the puncture site. "Results should be back in about a week. Dr. Okonkwo will call you directly." 1 week until Lindsay discovered whether she could save Corbin's life. 1 week until everything she thought she knew about her marriage shattered into pieces too small to ever reassemble. She walked back to the waiting area where Corbin sat alone. Chris was still on the phone in the hallway, his back to them, shoulders rigid with tension. "He's been stressed lately," Corbin said quietly, following Lindsay's gaze. "The business, the pressure, and now this." "Of course," Lindsay said, "anyone would be stressed. You're handling it well, the whole situation." It was the closest thing to a compliment Corbin had ever given her. Lindsay felt something loosen in her chest. Hope, maybe. The desperate, pathetic hope that sacrificing an organ might finally make her mother-in-law see her as something more than the woman who'd married her son. "We're family," Lindsay said. "This is what family does for each other." Corbin's expression shifted. Something flickered behind her eyes, there and gone too fast to identify. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Looked away toward where Chris still paced and gestured on his phone. Chris returned, shoving his phone in his pocket with more force than necessary. "Ready to go?" "Who was that?" Lindsay asked. "Work, a contractor. Issues with the Carson project." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "We should get Mom home. She needs to rest." They drove separately, Chris taking Corbin in his car, Lindsay following in hers. She watched them through her windshield at stoplights. watched Chris's head bent toward his mother, watched him speaking words she couldn't hear. Once Corbin turned and looked back at Lindsay's car. Her expression was completely blank. When Lindsay got home that evening, she immediately opened her laptop and started researching everything about kidney donation, recovery times, success rates, potential complications. She made notes about her work schedule, calculated how much leave she'd need to take, started planning for a future where she'd be missing one kidney, but gaining, finally, unquestionable acceptance into the Richards family. She didn't notice that Chris stayed in his office with the door closed, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent. She didn't notice the way he looked at her over dinner, not with love, but with something that looked almost like guilt. She didn't notice anything except her own determination to save a life, to prove her worth, to finally become the daughter Corbin had never quite allowed her to be. 7 days until the test results. 7 days until Lindsay Horan learned that the greatest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people you'd cut yourself open to save. Chapter 2. The Betrayal. The call came on Tuesday morning, exactly 7 days after the blood draw, while Lindsay was sitting in her car outside a client's office building reviewing her sales presentation. She'd barely slept the night before, kept awake by the strange weight of possibility that by the end of this day she might know whether she could save Corbin's life. "Ms. Horan, this is Dr. Okonkwo. I have your test results." Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. And a pause. Too long. The kind of silence that carried bad news in its weight. "I'm sorry. The tissue typing shows you're not compatible. Your blood type matches, but the HLA markers indicate high rejection risk. We can't proceed with you as a donor." The words landed like physical blows. Not compatible. Can't proceed. High rejection risk. But there must be... Could you test again? Maybe there was an error? Maybe... The testing is extremely accurate, Ms. Horan. I'm truly sorry. We'll continue searching for other options for Mrs. Richards. After he hung up, Lindsay sat in her car for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. She'd been so certain, so ready. She'd already told her boss she might need extended medical leave. She'd researched recovery protocols, prepared her body, steeled her mind for major surgery. And now that path was closed. She called Chris immediately. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail, text message, "Got my results. I'm not compatible. I'm so sorry. Call me." No response for an hour. Then finally, "I know. Dr. O called me first. I'll explain tonight. Don't worry." Don't worry? His mother was dying and their only solution had just evaporated. How could she not worry? By noon she'd called 3 more times. By evening Chris still wasn't answering. She drove to his office. His secretary said he'd left early for a site inspection. That was strange. Chris always told her when he had site visits scheduled. She tried Corbin's house. Maybe they were together, discussing next steps, looking for other donors. Chris's car was in the driveway, and another car, a silver sedan with a parking permit from his company hanging from the rearview mirror. Lindsay used her key. The voices came from the living room, Chris's and a woman's and Corbin's. She followed the sound. Chris stood near the fireplace with a young woman Lindsay vaguely recognized from company events. Amber, his project coordinator. She was pretty in an uncomplicated way, blonde and young, maybe late 20s, wearing a professional dress, and on her left hand, catching the afternoon light streaming through the bay windows, was an engagement ring. "Lindsay." Chris's face went white. He looked like someone who'd been caught mid-crime, frozen in the headlights of consequence. "I was going to call you. We were just... What's happening?" Lindsay's voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Chris pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. His hands shook slightly as he held it out. "These are divorce papers. I need you to sign them." The room stopped making sense. The words didn't connect to reality. Divorce papers. His mother was dying. "Amber's been tested," Chris said quickly. the words tumbling over each other. She's a perfect match. 6 markers. The best compatibility Dr. O has ever seen. She's going to donate. We're getting married after Mom's surgery. Lindsay looked at Amber, who was staring at Chris with growing confusion. Then at Corbin, who sat in her chair with an expression that might have been guilt or might have been relief. When did you test her? The words came out flat, emotionless, her brain trying to process information that wouldn't fit into any framework that made sense. After your results came back, I was devastated, terrified, and Amber offered. She volunteered immediately. After my results. Lindsay's mind was working through the timeline, through the logistics. That was yesterday. We rushed the testing, used a private facility, got results this morning. Chris still wouldn't meet her eyes. Lindsay, I know this is sudden, but Mom doesn't have time. Amber is the miracle we needed. I know it's fast, but we can't wait. We have to move forward now before what? Before I figure out what you're really doing. Amber shifted uncomfortably, her voice uncertain when she finally spoke. Chris told me you and he were separated, that the divorce was already happening, that his mother needed help, and I was the only match left. We're not separated, Lindsay said quietly, still trying to make the pieces fit. I found out I was supposedly incompatible yesterday. You were tested and got results in less than 24 hours. Chris's jaw tightened. The private facility expedited. Tissue typing takes 3 to 7 days minimum. You know that. I know that. Lindsay felt something cold settling in her chest, spreading through her veins like ice water. You had her tested before me, didn't you? The silence confirmed it. How long before? Her voice was still quiet, still controlled, but something underneath was beginning to crack. A week? 2 weeks? Tell me. 6 weeks, Corbin said from her chair. Her voice was tired but steady, carrying the same judicial certainty it always carried. Right after my diagnosis, Amber was tested 6 weeks ago. The numbers fell into place like dominoes. 6 weeks ago, before Chris had even suggested Lindsay get tested. Before that appointment in Dr. Okonkwo's office, where she'd volunteered so eagerly, where she'd offered up her body without hesitation. You already had a donor, Lindsay said slowly, each word precise, surgical. Before you let me volunteer, before you let me go through the testing, you already knew she was a match. I was terrified, Chris said, and now the words were tumbling out desperately, trying to fill the space opening up between them. You're my wife, Lindsay. If I let you donate and something went wrong, if there were complications, if you died on that table, I couldn't risk you. You're too important. I needed a backup plan, someone else who could save Mom without me risking everything, without me potentially losing you both. So you tested your employee first. Amber was willing. She's young, healthy, and when she came back as a perfect match, Lindsay, you have to understand, I was trying to protect you. By lying to me? By letting me think I was helping when you'd already decided I was too valuable to use? The anger was building now, hot and sharp, burning through the ice. By having my test results, what? Falsified? So you could point to Amber as the solution without looking like you'd planned this from the beginning? She saw it in his face. The confirmation, the guilt, the moment he realized she'd figured out what he'd done. I couldn't lose you, Chris whispered. I couldn't risk you. Amber was expendable. I don't mean that cruelly, but she has no family, no children, no husband. If something went wrong with her surgery, Mom would still have a chance with the National Registry. But if something happened to you, get out! Corbin's voice cut through the room like a gavel. She was looking at Amber now, not Chris. You need to leave. This is family business. Amber's face went pale, her hand moving instinctively to the engagement ring. You told me they were separated. You said the divorce was filed months ago. You said she wanted nothing to do with his mother's illness. You said, not now. Chris said tersely, his attention still on Lindsay, still trying to manage the disaster unfolding. Yes, now. Amber's voice was rising, panic and realization mixing into something sharp. You lied to me. About her. About your marriage. About everything. I thought I was helping save a life. I thought I was... She looked at Lindsay, eyes filling with tears. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. He told me you'd left him, that you wanted nothing to do with his mother's illness. I never would have... I volunteered the moment I heard she was sick, Lindsay said. Her voice was still eerily calm, like all the emotion had drained out through some invisible wound. I offered immediately. I went through testing. I thought I was saving his mother's life. Amber's expression crumpled. She yanked the engagement ring off her finger and threw it at Chris. It bounced off his chest and clattered across the hardwood floor. I'm not doing this, any of this. Find another donor. She grabbed her purse and pushed past Lindsay toward the door. Amber, wait. Chris chased after her, leaving Lindsay alone with Corbin. They stared at each other across the living room. 8 years of careful distance. 8 years of Lindsay trying to bridge a gap that Corbin had deliberately maintained. You knew about this, Lindsay said. Not a question. Chris was terrified of losing you. I told him to test others first, to find someone who could help without risking what he couldn't afford to lose. So you let me get tested knowing it didn't matter, knowing he'd already found his perfect match. We weren't sure you'd match. If you hadn't, none of this would... But I did match, didn't I? The realization was crystallizing now, sharp and clear. I was compatible, and Chris had Dr. Okonkwo change my results so he wouldn't be trapped with me. Corbin's silence was confirmation enough. Why? Because a mother wants her son to be happy, because I'm dying and I wanted to make sure he'd have the life he deserved after I'm gone, because Amber was perfect, young, grateful, willing to build her life around him. And you... Corbin's voice was tired, matter of fact. You were always going to leave eventually, Lindsay. Your career, your independence, your ambitions. You were never going to be satisfied being just a wife. I could see it. Chris couldn't, but I could. So you decided to replace me with someone who would be satisfied, someone younger, someone more grateful. I decided to save my son from a mistake he made 8 years ago when he was too young to know what he actually needed in a partner. Lindsay felt something break inside her chest, not her heart, something deeper. The part that had believed she could earn belonging through sacrifice. The part that had thought perfection would be enough. Where are the papers? She asked, her voice hollow. Corbin gestured to the envelope Chris had dropped on the side table. Lindsay picked it up. Didn't open it. Just held it, feeling the weight of 8 years reduced to documents and legal terminology. I'm not signing these today. Lindsay, I'm going to find out exactly what happened. Every detail, every lie, every manipulation. And then I'm going to decide what to do with that information. She walked toward the door, then stopped, turned back. You're dying. And the person who was willing to cut herself open to save you is the one you and your son conspired to throw away. I hope that keeps you company in whatever time you have left. She left. Got in her car, drove home on autopilot, her hands steady on the wheel even as her entire world disintegrated around her. And then she made a phone call. Foster Law Group. I need to speak with Diane Foster. Tell her it's about medical fraud, and tell her I'm willing to spend whatever it takes to prove it. Chapter 3. The truth emerges. Diane Foster's office occupied the top floor of a glass building downtown. The woman herself was in her mid-50s, silver hair cut sharp, wearing a suit that cost more than Lindsay's monthly salary. She looked like someone who destroyed opposing counsel without breaking a sweat. Tell me everything, Diane said once Lindsay was seated. Lindsay told her. The diagnosis, the volunteering, the incompatibility call, finding Chris with Amber, divorce papers, engagement ring. The timeline that didn't add up. Amber tested and matched in less than 24 hours. When Lindsay finished, Diane set down her pen. Your husband is either an idiot, or he thinks you are. This screams medical fraud. Can you get your records? I can request them. Do it. Request everything. Lab logs, version histories, metadata. HIPAA requires they provide it all. 3 days later, Lindsay's complete medical file arrived. She spread documents across her table with systematic precision. She knew medical databases. She'd helped implement MedTrack Plus at 3 facilities. She knew its security protocols, audit trails, vulnerabilities. The final report showed incompatible, high rejection risk. But Lindsay read technical documentation. Page 47 held the raw lab data. 5-point match. Excellent donor candidate. Low rejection probability, 8%. Her hands shook as she photographed it. Then she found the version history buried deeper, the metadata showing every file access. Original report, Tuesday 2:47 p.m. Compatible donor, 5 HLA markers match. Recommend phase 2 evaluation. Rejection probability, 8%. Excellent candidate. Second version, Tuesday 4:12 p.m. User, Jokonkwo. Incompatible. Elevated rejection risk, 65%. Cannot proceed. No explanation, no additional tests, just alteration from compatible to incompatible. 90 minutes later, she photographed everything, raw data, version history. Access log showing Dr. Okonkwo pulled her file at 4:08 p.m., 4 minutes before the altered report. She took it to Diane. This is airtight, Diane said, reviewing with practiced scrutiny. He altered results directly. Version history proves it. Access logs prove it. We can prove fraud. But why would Dr. Okonkwo risk his career? Diane's investigator had answers within 2 days. Corbin presided over Dr. Okonkwo's divorce 8 years earlier. She'd ruled decisively for him. Primary custody, protected assets. Court transcripts showed favoritism bordering on judicial misconduct. He owed her, Diane said. Big time. She called in the debt. There was more. Diane's investigator pulled Amber's donor screening from the private facility. She is a 6-point match, Diane spread documents. Exceptional. But look, medical history showed past drug use, hepatitis C treatment at 16, early kidney damage in function tests. Nothing disqualifying, but concerning. The evaluation summary noted, candidate approved with reservations, kidney function adequate but suboptimal due to substance abuse. Estimated transplant longevity, 8 to 12 years versus 20 plus for healthy donor. Long-term success may be compromised. Recommend alternative donors if available. Chris knew this, Lindsay said quietly. He knew Amber's kidney was questionable. That's why he tested me. Insurance in case Amber didn't work out. Exactly. But when you came back as 5-point match, nearly as good as Amber with none of her complications, he panicked. Proceeding with you meant staying married. Divorcing after you matched made him look monstrous. So he falsified your results. Could point to Amber as only option while keeping you as backup if she was rejected. The cruelty wasn't just betrayal. It was calculation. Treating her like commodity to be valued and utilized rather than person to be loved. He said he did it to protect me, Lindsay said, that I was too precious to risk. People excel at convincing themselves selfish choices are noble. Diane leaned forward. What do you want? I want them to understand what they lost, what they threw away, but... Lindsay paused. Amber's surgery is in 3 weeks. If we expose this now, hospital might refuse. Dr. Okonkwo could lose his license immediately. Corbin could die before finding another donor. Would that bother you? Lindsay thought about Corbin's trembling hand, eyes assessing rather than warm for 8 years. About Chris destroying their marriage rather than risk her. About being valued as insurance, not person. Yes, not because I owe her anything, but letting her die to make a point would make me like them, willing to let someone suffer to get what I want. I refuse to become what they are. So we wait until after Amber's surgery. Let them think they won. then show them what winning cost. Exactly. Over 2 weeks, Lindsay played her part, hired her own attorney but didn't sign papers, ignored Chris's desperate calls. When she answered, she was cold, distant. Please, Lindsay, just sign. Don't make this harder. I'm considering options. You'll have answers when I'm ready. She met Amber twice. First was Amber's idea, tentative text asking to talk. Amber looked exhausted, younger than 29, jeans and sweater, no makeup. Terrified. I didn't know you were still married, Amber said before Lindsay sat. Chris told me 6 months separated, that you wanted nothing to do with his mother, that divorce was just paperwork. I thought I was helping a crisis, not participating in... Her voice broke. I'm so sorry. I believe you. You do? Chris is good at lying. He convinced us both. Lindsay ordered coffee. How long have you known him? About a year. Started at his company 14 months ago. He was kind, supportive. Knew about my past. Drug use, rehab, never judged. Made me feel like more than my mistakes. When did it become romantic? 8 months ago. Amber twisted her cup. He said separated but couldn't file yet. His mother sick, stressed too much. Said once stable, he'd finalize with you. Then she got worse, diagnosis came, suddenly everything about finding a donor. When did he ask you tested? 6 weeks ago. Said his mother's doctor mentioned I might match based on blood type. Asked if I'd at least test, no pressure. I said yes immediately. Tears filled her eyes. I thought I was helping, repaying him for giving me a chance, for seeing me as more than recovering addict. You are a match. 6 points. Exceptional. Yes. When results came, Chris was so happy, proposed 2 days later, said we'd marry after surgery, start our life once she was saved. She wiped eyes. But he never told me about problems in my screening. Lindsay slid documents across. Your kidney function adequate but compromised. Hepatitis C and drug use caused damage. Nothing disqualifying but enough for transplant concerns. They estimate 8 to 12 years versus 20 plus for healthy donor. Amber read, face going pale. He knew? Had to. These were part of your evaluation. He saw before proposing. But he said I was perfect, saving his mother's life, that I was... Realization settled. I was convenient, matched well enough, willing. He needed donor. I was there, eager to help. He used that. He used both of us, you for kidney, me as backup insurance. They sat in silence. Finally, Amber spoke. What will you do? Lindsay told her. Not everything. Enough. About falsified results, about being excellent match Chris hid, about evidence gathered. I'm letting your surgery happen. Corbin is dying, still human, deserving life chance, even if terrible person. But after surgery, after stable, I'm making sure everyone understands what Chris did. To both of us. Amber was quiet. I don't know if I can do it. Surgery, knowing I was used, knowing he lied about kidney health, knowing I'm about to marry someone who... Your choice. I won't tell you what to do with your body. But his mother dies without donor. Not your responsibility. You don't owe Chris Richards anything. You don't owe Corbin anything. You owe yourself honesty, dignity, right to choose based on full information, not manipulation. Amber nodded slowly. Can I think? I have 3 weeks. Take the time. They exchanged numbers. 2 women caught in the same man's web, trying to untangle without losing pieces of themselves. Night before Amber's scheduled surgery, Lindsay sat alone, hand pressed against left side where they'd cut if allowed to donate, where kidney would have been removed if Chris hadn't decided she was too valuable to use. Phone buzzed. Amber. Going through with surgery tomorrow. Not for Chris. Not even Corbin, really. Because I said I would, and I keep promises even when others break theirs. But after recovered, I'm done with them. Wanted you to know. Lindsay replied, That's brave. Good luck. You're stronger than you think. She put phone down and stared at nothing. Tomorrow, Amber would donate a kidney Chris knew was compromised, might only last 8 to 12 years, accepted because convenient, not optimal. And Lindsay would be there, watching, waiting, ready to show Chris Richards exactly what he threw away when he decided his wife was too precious to risk, but not precious enough to keep. Chapter 4. The surgery fails surgery day arrived cold and clear. Lindsay drove to hospital at dawn before surgical prep. She wasn't supposed to be there. Chris specifically asked her to stay away, but divorce wasn't finalized. Legally, she was still family. She had every right to surgical waiting area. The room was sterile beige, uncomfortable chairs bolted down, magazines 6 months old. Lindsay chose a seat near window where she could see surgical board listing Corbin's procedure. Status: scheduled 8 a.m. Chris arrived 7:30, looking aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Unshaven, rumpled clothes, moved like a man who hadn't slept days, probably hadn't. Saw Lindsay across room, froze mid-step. For a moment she thought he might approach, try once more to convince her to sign, and disappear. Instead, he turned away, sank into opposite chair, pulled out phone without really seeing it. Amber prepped an hour ago, Lindsay knew from text. In pre-op, terrified but committed. See you other side. Corbin prepped next, 30 minutes after Amber. Surgeries supposed simultaneous. Amber's kidney harvested one room while Corbin opened and prepared another, then transplant once organ secured. Surgical board updated. Amber Gallagher, in OR status, surgery in progress. 15 minutes later, Corbin Richards, in OR status, surgery in progress. Lindsay watched clock. Kidney harvesting typically 2 to 3 hours. Transplant another 3 to 4. She'd researched every detail, knew every step, understood timeline like memorized for tests she'd never take. 1 hour passed. Chris paced near windows, made quiet calls to business associates or friends, kept glancing at her like bomb he couldn't defuse. Something dangerous might explode any moment. 2 hours. Other families received updates. Chris received nothing. Uncertainty eating him alive. Lindsay saw it in how he moved, hands shaking when trying to drink coffee, checking phone as if willing good news. 2 hours, 20 minutes, Dr. Okonkwo emerged from surgical wing. Still in scrubs, surgical cap, mask hanging, face carefully neutral, professional, but eyes carried something else. Exhaustion, maybe resignation. Chris lunged toward him before fully clearing doors. How is she? Is Mom? We've had to abort the procedure. Waiting room held its breath. Families reading or scrolling looked up. Everyone suddenly witnessing something terrible. What? Chris's voice cracked. What do you mean, abort? During harvesting, we discovered extensive damage to Ms. Gallagher's kidney not showing clearly in preoperative imaging. Tissue has significant scarring, vascular abnormalities, reduced function consistent with past substance abuse, damage more severe than screening indicated. Dr. Okonkwo's voice steady, clinical, practiced neutrality delivering bad news. The organ isn't viable. If we proceed, it will fail. We decided to abort and close both patients. Chris staggered backward like physically struck. But screening, you said approved. You said... Screening showed early concerns, noted but not disqualifying then. But sometimes full damage extent isn't visible until examining tissue directly during surgery. Kidney looked adequate on ultrasound and CT, but once harvested and examined directly, we could see scarring too extensive. Areas already non-functional. Transplanting would have been malpractice. What about Mom? Where is Mom? We've closed her without transplant. Moving to recovery now. But Mr. Richards... Dr. Okonkwo paused. Something flickered that might have been sympathy or guilt. Your mother's condition deteriorated significantly. Anesthesia stress, surgical prep, physical trauma of opening and closing without transplant. Her remaining kidney function declined sharply. She has days now, perhaps 2 weeks fortunate. We need another donor immediately or put her back on registry. Emergency priority. Test, everyone, test. Chris's eyes went wild, scanning room, landing on Lindsay. She saw calculation happen, desperation overrode pride and shame and everything else. Test Lindsay again, he said hoarsely, broken. My wife. She volunteered before, was willing. Test her again. Mr. Richards, she was already tested. Results showed incompatibility. High rejection risk, we can't, but maybe error. Tests can be wrong, right? Maybe if tested again, maybe if double-checked. There was no error. Lindsay's voice cut across waiting room, clear and cold as winter glass. Every head turned. Chris, Dr. Okonkwo, other families pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. Lindsay stood, walked toward them slowly, deliberately, pulled folder from bag, the one she'd been carrying 3 weeks, waiting for this exact moment. Evidence, proof, weapon forged from their lies. There was no error in my testing, she said again, louder. Results were falsified. I was always compatible. 5-point match. Excellent donor candidate. 8% rejection risk. Dr. Okonkwo altered my report at Corbyn's request. Waiting room went completely silent. Even families pretending not to watch were openly staring. Dr. Okonkwo's face went white. Ms. Horan, that's serious. It's truth. She opened folder, pulled documents. Raw lab data showing actual compatibility. Version history showing your modifications 90 minutes after original results. Access logs proving you pulled my file minutes before falsified version. Testimony from your nurse about Corbyn's call asking you to take care of my results. She turned to Chris. You knew I was perfect match and had results changed so you could leave without looking like monster. You tested Amber first, 6 weeks before suggesting I get tested. When she matched but had medical red flags, tested me as insurance. And when I matched too well, when my kidney would have been healthier, lasted longer, given your mother better outcome than Amber's, you panicked. Because proceeding with me meant staying married, so you falsified results and pointed to Amber as only option. Chris made sound between sob and laugh. You knew? This whole time, knew you could save her and said nothing? I said nothing because waiting for this exact moment, the moment you understood your mother dying because of choices you made, because you cared more about escaping marriage than giving her best possible outcome. She's still dying. Chris's voice broke completely. Whatever I did, whatever mistakes, she's still dying right now. You could save her. You could still do it. Please, please, Lindsay, I'm begging. I know you are. She looked at Dr. Okonkwo. You committed medical fraud. For what? An old favor? Because Corbyn helped your divorce 8 years ago and you felt you owed her? You risked career, license, freedom for this. Dr. Okonkwo couldn't meet her eyes. I made terrible mistake. Convinced myself helping desperate family. I was wrong. Lindsay turned back to Chris. You made choice. Decided I was too valuable to risk but not valuable enough to keep. Chose convenience over honesty. Chose younger woman who'd be grateful and compliant over wife with ambitions and opinions. And now backup plan literally failed on operating table, and you're left with woman you tried to discard as only option. She closed folder, put it back. I'm going to check on Amber. She just went through surgery for nothing because you knew her kidney was compromised and used her anyway. Wait, Lindsay, wait. Chris grabbed her arm. What does that mean? Are you going to... Will you... She pulled free, looked at him directly. I don't know yet. But you'll get answer when I'm ready, not before. She walked away, leaving Chris standing looking like floor opened beneath him. Behind her, she heard him collapse into chair, heard sobbing he wasn't trying to hide. Recovery area was restricted, but Lindsay told nurse she was Amber's emergency contact. Nurse checked tablet, frowned, but let her through. Amber was Bay 7 behind curtain, hooked to monitors, IV in arm. Eyes open, staring at ceiling. Hey, Lindsay said softly. It didn't work. Amber's voice rough from intubation. They said my kidney too damaged, would have failed. All that, prep, surgery, letting them cut me open. For nothing. Not your fault. Screening should have caught this earlier. Doctors should have... Where's Chris? Out in waiting room. Having breakdown. Good. Amber's laugh turned cough. He knew, didn't he? About my kidney being damaged. Saw red flags and used me anyway because convenient. Yes. And you? You were better match all along. Yes. Are you going to save her? Donate? Lindsay was quiet. I don't know yet. She doesn't deserve it. Neither of them deserve it. No, but maybe that's not the point. Amber looked at her fully for first time. Then what is the point? I haven't figured that out yet. Before Lindsay could say more, raised voices erupted in hallway. Chris's voice loud and frantic. I need to see Amber. I need to... Nurse responded firmly. Sir, she's in recovery. You can't... I'm her fiancé. I have right... You have no rights here. Please leave before I call security. Curtain whipped open. Chris stood there, wild-eyed, desperate. Looked at Amber in bed, then Lindsay. I need to talk to both of you. I need... Mom has days. I'm begging you both, please. Whatever I did, don't let her die for it. That's not justice. That's just cruelty. Get out, Amber said, voice weak but firm. Amber, please. You understand what's at stake. I understand you lied to me. About Lindsay, about your marriage, about my kidney health. I understand you used me. That you saw red flags in screening and ignored them because I was convenient and compliant and desperate to prove I was worth something. Her monitors started beeping faster, heart rate spiking. We're done. Engagement over. I'm not marrying you. I'm not helping you. I'm done. Nurse pushed past Chris. You need to leave. Now. You're upsetting my patient. But I need security, Nurse said into pager. Recovery Bay 7, patient distressed. Male visitor needs immediate removal. Security arrived within seconds. 2 large men who escorted Chris out firmly but not roughly. His voice echoed down hallway, still begging, still desperate, growing fainter as they moved him back toward waiting area where he belonged. Lindsay stayed with Amber until heart rate settled, until Nurse was satisfied she was stable. What are you going to do? Amber asked once more. I'm going to think about it. Then make choice that's entirely mine. Not manipulated, not coerced, not influenced by guilt or pity or Chris's desperation. Lindsay stood. Rest, heal, and know whatever happens next, you're not part of this anymore. You're free of them. Are you free of them? Lindsay thought about that. About divorce papers still unsigned. About Corbin lying in recovery somewhere in this hospital, waking with no new kidney and very little time left. About Chris broken and desperate in waiting room. No, she admitted. Not yet. But I will be. One way or another I will be. She left hospital and sat in car 30 minutes. Hands on steering wheel, staring at nothing. She held all power now. Chris and Corbin completely at her mercy. She could walk away and let Corbin die, and there wouldn't be thing they could do to stop her. Or she could donate, on her terms, with conditions that would strip them of everything they had left. She pulled out phone and called Diane. Amber's surgery failed. Kidney 2 damaged. Corbin has days. What do you want? Set up meeting, tomorrow. Chris, Corbin, you, me. Hospital conference room. Tell them I have terms. What terms? Lindsay looked at hospital building. Somewhere inside, Corbin was waking, learning she'd been cut open for nothing, learning she'd run out of options, learning only person left who could save her was daughter-in-law she'd spent 8 years trying to replace. Everything, Lindsay said. I want everything they have, and I want them to understand exactly what they're giving me and why. She hung up and started car. Tomorrow, she'd show Chris and Corbin Richards what mercy looked like when it came with price tag they couldn't afford to refuse, but would spend rest of their lives trying to pay. Chapter 5. The Price. They met in hospital conference room at 10 next morning. Corbin arrived in wheelchair, pale and weak, IV pole attached. Chris sat next to her, looking hollowed out and poorly reassembled. Diane was beside Lindsay, stack of documents on table. Lindsay placed single folder in front of Chris and Corbin. Said nothing, just waited. Chris opened it with shaking hands. Inside were legal documents, financial settlements, resignation letters, public confessions, page after page of consequences rendered in legal language. "These are my terms," Lindsay said. Voice quiet, controlled, carrying none of fury beneath surface. "Sign them, I donate. Don't sign, I walk away." "What are the terms?" Corbin's voice weak but still carrying judicial authority, refusal to crumble even now. Lindsay had practiced this moment. She'd written speeches in head, imagined elaborate explanations of exactly what she was taking and why they deserved it. Instead, she said 6 words. "Everything, I want everything you have." Silence in conference room was absolute. "Be specific," Diane prompted, voice professional, unemotional. Lindsay pulled out first document, slid it across. "Financial settlement, 70% of all marital assets. House, investment accounts. Your business equity, Chris. You keep 30%, enough to survive, not enough to maintain life you've built." Chris stared at numbers. Face went grey. I'll have almost nothing." "You'll have more than nothing. You'll have exactly what someone deserves who committed medical fraud to abandon wife." Lindsay's voice remained flat, factual. "Next document, your public confession. Everything you did, your own words, falsified test results, manipulation, lies to both women. This gets released to everyone you know, professional networks, friends, family, social media. My career will be destroyed." "Yes." She slid another document. "Corbin's resignation from every board position, every committee, every professional organization. With public statement acknowledging your role in fraud." Corbin's hand trembled where it rested on table. "You'll destroy what I spent 30 years building. You destroyed what I spent 8 years building. Now we're even." "No mercy?" Corbin asked quietly, something in voice that might have been genuine curiosity. "No compassion?" Lindsay looked at her steadily. "This is mercy. You're alive to sign these papers. That's more mercy than you've shown me in 8 years." Chris picked up confession statement. "Read through slowly. Set it down. And if we sign, you'll actually donate?" "Yes." "When?" "As soon as surgical team can schedule. This week, probably. Your mother doesn't have time to wait." "Why?" Corbin asked. "Why save me after everything we did?" The question hung in air. Lindsay had asked herself same thing dozens of times over past weeks, had examined motivations from every angle, trying to understand if this was mercy or manipulation, nobility, or just sophisticated revenge. "Because I want you to live," she said finally. "I want you to wake up every morning knowing my kidney is keeping you alive. I want you to remember this moment, signing away everything you had, begging for mercy from woman you called not family. I want you to carry that knowledge every single day for however many years I give you." She leaned forward slightly. "Chris said he falsified results to protect me, that I was too precious to risk. But truth is I was too inconvenient to keep, too independent, too focused on career, too much myself. You both decided I wasn't worth keeping, but I was worth using as insurance. So yes, I'll save your life, Corbin, and you'll spend rest of it knowing woman you tried to erase is only reason you're still breathing." Corbin's eyes filled with tears. "That's cruel." "That's justice." Chris looked at mother, then documents, then Lindsay. "What guarantee do we have? How do we know you won't take everything and still walk away?" Diane spoke up. "Agreement includes clause. If Ms. Horan backs out without valid medical cause, assets revert to Mr. Richards. But if she proceeds, and doctors already cleared her based on actual unaltered test results, settlement stands." "We have 24 hours to sign," Lindsay said. "After that, Offer expires and you can spend Corbin's remaining days trying to find another donor who matches as well as I do. Spoiler, you won't find one. I'm her best chance. Her only chance, really. She stood. Diane followed. They walked toward door. Lindsay? Chris's voice stopped her. Not pleading now, just broken. I really was trying to protect you. I was terrified of losing you. She looked back at him. You were terrified of losing your mother. I was just collateral damage in that fear. The difference matters, Chris. It matters that you chose to protect her at cost of me. It matters that you decided I was disposable enough to lie to, but valuable enough to keep as backup. Those choices define who you are. And now you get to live with being that person. She left them there with impossible choice. Sign away everything or let Corbin die with nothing. Outside conference room, Diane asked quietly, "Do you think they'll sign?" "Yes." "How do you know?" "Because Corbin is dying and Chris loves her more than he loves his pride, his money, his reputation. He'll sign. She'll sign. They'll give me everything I've asked for because alternative is her death and him living with knowledge he could have saved her but chose his assets instead. And then you'll actually go through with donation." Lindsay looked out window at parking lot, at normal world continuing normal business while inside this building lives were being destroyed and rebuilt and destroyed again. "Yes, I'll donate. Not because they deserve it, but because I need to. Because walking away and letting her die would turn me into them, someone who values winning over doing what's right, and I refuse to let them make me into that. Even though you hate them, I don't hate them," Lindsay said quietly. "I pity them. They're so afraid of everything, of losing control, of being alone, of not getting exactly what they want, that they destroyed people to feel safe. That's not hate-worthy. That's just sad." They left hospital. That evening, courier delivered signed documents. All of them. Financial settlement giving Lindsay 70% of everything. Chris's confession detailing fraud in own words. Corbin's resignation letters from every position she held. Everything signed without modifications or attempts to negotiate. Chris had included handwritten note, "Thank you. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. I never did. Thank you." Lindsay read it once, then put it in drawer without responding. Surgery was scheduled for following Tuesday, 5 days away. 5 days for Lindsay to prepare herself for giving piece of her body to people who'd tried to destroy her. 5 days to make peace with decision that still didn't feel entirely right, but felt necessary in ways she couldn't fully articulate. On Monday night, she couldn't sleep. She sat in living room at 2 in morning, hand pressed against left side where they'd cut her open tomorrow, where they'd reach inside and remove kidney, where she'd carry scar for rest of her life. She thought about calling it off, about letting 24-hour window expire without follow-through, about taking their money and confessions and resignations and still walking away, keeping everything while they lost everything including Corbin's life. It would be perfect revenge, complete, total, devastating, but it would also turn her into someone she didn't want to be, someone who could watch another person die to make point, someone who valued satisfaction over mercy. Her phone buzzed, text from unknown number. "This is Amber. I heard you're going through with it. I don't understand you, but I respect you. You're either strongest person I've ever met or craziest. Maybe both. Good luck tomorrow. You're saving life that tried to destroy yours." I don't even have words for what that is. Just good luck. Lindsay stared at message long time, then typed back, "I don't understand me either. But I have to do this. Not for them. For me. So I can live with myself after." She turned off phone and tried to sleep. Failed. Spent rest of night watching darkness slowly turn to dawn, thinking about woman she'd been in Dr. Okonkwo's office 3 months ago, volunteering without hesitation, and woman she was now, calculating revenge while preparing to show mercy. She didn't know which woman was stronger. She didn't know which one she wanted to be. She only knew that in few hours she'd go under anesthesia and wake up with one less kidney and choice she'd have to live with for rest of her life, and that whatever happened after, she'd survive it. Because surviving was what Lindsay Horan did, even when survival cost her everything. Chapter 6. The Surgery. The hospital room at 5 in morning felt like liminal space. Not quite night, not quite day, existing in some grey zone where normal rules didn't apply. Lindsay sat on edge of surgical bed, bare feet on cold linoleum, wearing gown that left her exposed in ways having nothing to do with fabric. A nurse came in to check vitals one final time. "How are you feeling?" "Ready." "Nervous?" "Past nervous. I'm in some other territory now." Nurse smiled gently. "That's normal. You're doing something extraordinary." Was she? Lindsay wasn't sure anymore. Extraordinary implied nobility, heroism, sacrifice for right reasons. What she was doing felt more like calculated destruction disguised as mercy. She was giving Corbin life so that every breath would taste like defeat. Dr. Okonkwo appeared in doorway. He looked 10 years older than at her initial appointment. Weight of what he'd done had carved lines into face, turned hair grayer at temples. "May I speak with you?" Lindsay nodded. Nurse left, closing door behind her. Dr. Okonkwo stood near window, backlit by pre-dawn glow. "My medical license will be revoked after today. Hospital board accepted my resignation. I've already spoken with prosecutors about plea agreement." "Good. I wanted to tell you something before you go under. Something transplant team discovered during Corbin's final compatibility screening." He pulled chart from pocket. "Your match with her isn't just exceptional, it's statistically impossible for unrelated individuals. Genetic overlap suggests—" "Stop," Lindsay held up hand. "I don't want to know. But whatever you're about to tell me, it doesn't change what I'm doing today. It just adds complexity I'm not ready to process while someone's about to cut me open." She looked at him directly. "Tell me after. If I survive, tell me after." Dr. Okonkwo hesitated, then nodded. "After then." He left. Lindsay sat alone with information she'd refused to hear, knowing somehow it was enormous, that it would reshape everything, that she was right to postpone it until she wasn't about to be sliced open and have organ removed. Dr. Susan Park entered next, surgical cap already on, confidence radiating from every movement. "Last chance to back out." "I'm not backing out. Your kidney is going to function beautifully in her body. Compatibility markers show integration we rarely see outside identical twins. This is once-in-a-decade match, Ms. Horan. Maybe once in a lifetime. And Amber's kidney would have failed. Within decade, yes. Possibly sooner. Damage from past drug use more extensive than initial screening suggested. You're giving Corbin 30 years she wouldn't have gotten otherwise." Lindsay thought about that. 30 years of life. 30 years of waking up knowing who'd given her that life. 30 years of being unable to escape woman she'd tried to discard. "Let's get started," Lindsay said. Anesthesiologist administered sedation through IV. Room began to soften at edges. Sounds becoming muffled, surgical lights above blurring into white. Her last thought before darkness pulled her under was, "I'm doing this. I'm actually doing this, and I still don't know if it makes me strong or if it just makes me someone who can't let go." Then nothing. Surgery took 6 hours. Lindsay woke in fragments. First just sensation, pain radiating from left side like she'd been torn open and poorly reassembled. Then sound. Machines beeping, people talking in low voices. Then vision. Recovery room ceiling, unfamiliar and institutional. Nurse materialized beside bed. "Welcome back. Surgery went perfectly. Your kidney started working immediately in recipient. Dr. Park said it was one of smoothest transplants she's ever performed." Lindsay tried to speak, but throat was raw from intubation. Nurse offered ice chips. "Mrs. Richards is in recovery as well, doing beautifully. You saved her life." "Had she?" Or had she just extended it long enough for Corbin to fully understand what it meant to be saved by daughter she'd abandoned? Lindsay closed eyes and let medication drag her back under before she could answer own question. When she woke again, room was dark except for glow of monitors. Diane sat in corner, reading something on phone. "What time is it?" Lindsay's voice, rough, barely recognizable. "9 at night. You've been out most of day." "Chris? Tried to visit 4 times. Security removed him each time per your instructions." Diane set down phone. "Corbin is stable. Kidney functioning at 97% capacity. They're calling it miracle match." "Not miracle. Just genetics." "What?" "Nothing. Did confession publish?" 2 hours ago. Already trending. Media picked it up. Chris's life imploding as we speak." Diane moved closer to bed. "Are you okay? You look strange." "I feel strange. Like I gave away more than kidney. Like I left something else on that operating table." "That's anesthesia talking." "Maybe. Or maybe I finally understand what I actually did." Lindsay shifted, immediately regretted as pain shot through abdomen. "Dr. Okonkwo tried to tell me something before surgery. About my compatibility with Corbin. About it being impossible for unrelated people." Diane's expression changed. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't think Corbin and I are unrelated. I'm saying there might be reason our genetics line up like family. I'm saying I refused to hear it before surgery because I couldn't process it and go through with donation, but now—" She stopped. "Now I need to know." "I'll find out," Diane said. "But Lindsay, if what you're suggesting is true, then everything is worse than I thought, and I need to know exactly how much worse before I decide what to do about it." After Diane left, Lindsay lay in dark, hand pressed against bandages on side. Under gauze and surgical tape, her body was healing around absence, kidney-shaped hole that would never be filled, that would always be empty, that would be permanent reminder of this moment when she chose power over peace. Her phone lit up with message from unknown number. "This is Corbin. I'm awake. They told me what you did. I don't have words. Thank you doesn't begin to cover this. You gave me life when you had every reason to let me die. I don't understand you, but I'm grateful. More grateful than I can express." Lindsay stared at message until screen went dark. Then she turned phone face down on bedside table and closed eyes. Tomorrow she'd learn truth about why her kidney matched Corbin's so perfectly. Tonight she'd just survived pain and medication and knowledge that she'd done something irreversible that she still couldn't name as right or wrong. Tomorrow, everything would become clear tomorrow. Or it would become so much worse that clarity would be impossible. Either way, it was done. Kidney was gone. Revenge was in motion. And Lindsay Horan was someone new now, someone who could cut herself open for strategic purposes, someone who weaponized sacrifice, someone she wasn't entirely sure she liked, but someone who'd survived. That had to count for something, even if she didn't yet know what. Chapter 7. The Biological Truth. Lindsay was discharged 3 days after surgery. Diane drove her home, helped her inside, got her settled on couch with pillows supporting incision site. "I found something," Diane said once Lindsay was comfortable, "about your compatibility with Corbin." "Tell me." Transplant team ran extended genetic panels as part of post-surgical analysis, standard procedure for living donors. They noted unusual markers, genetic overlap that shouldn't exist between unrelated individuals. Diane pulled out folder. "So I had our investigator pull adoption records from Detroit circa 1988 to 1990, cross-referenced with Corbin's medical history." Lindsay's chest tightened. "And?" "Corbin gave birth to daughter in March 1989, closed adoption. Records were sealed, but we found intermediary agency. They confirmed adoptive family, Detroit residents, 3 sons, wanted daughter. Mother died of cancer when adopted daughter was 19. Room tilted. Lindsay gripped couch cushion to steady herself. Lindsay, Corbin is your biological mother. Chris is your half-brother. You married your half-brother without knowing. She knew entire time and never told you. Words hung in air like smoke, toxic and unavoidable. Lindsay's brain tried to process them, to fit them into framework of her life, but they wouldn't fit. They shattered everything. I need to... She stood too quickly, pain shooting through side, and barely made it to bathroom before she vomited. Everything in stomach came up. Hospital breakfast, medications, bile that tasted like horror and revulsion. Diane appeared in doorway. Lindsay, don't! Lindsay gripped toilet, dry heaving now, body trying to expel something that couldn't be expelled because it was inside her history, woven into past 8 years. I married my brother. I tried for years to have children with my brother. She vomited again, though there was nothing left. Body convulsing around knowledge, trying to reject it the way it would reject poison. When spasms finally stopped, she sat on bathroom floor, back against wall, trembling. Diane handed her glass of water. Lindsay rinsed mouth, spit, rinsed again. She knew, Lindsay said, voice hollow, distant. First time Chris brought me home, she recognized me. Probably. Investigator found photos from adoption file, your birth records. You looked like her mother, apparently. Same eyes, same bone structure. She would have known immediately. And she said nothing. She watched Chris fall in love with me, watched us get married, watched us try for children that... Lindsay couldn't finish sentence. Biology of it, genetics, possibility that any child they'd conceived might have been... She was going to be sick again. The children, Diane said quietly. If you'd had any. Genetic overlap between half-siblings significantly increases risks of congenital disorders, developmental issues. Stop talking. Lindsay's hands shaking so hard, water glass rattled against teeth. I can't hear this right now, I can't. But she could. She had to. Because this wasn't going away. This was permanent, carved into her past like scar on side, impossible to remove or revise. She'd married her half-brother. She'd spent 8 years sleeping beside him, touching him, letting him touch her in ways that... Nausea surged again, but she fought it down. She wouldn't give this any more of her body. It had taken enough. Does Chris know? She asked. Not yet. But he needs to be told. This changes everything about fraud case. Corbin knew you were family. She knew your compatibility would be exceptional because of genetic relationship. She used that knowledge to manipulate entire situation. Lindsay stood slowly, carefully, one hand pressed against incision. She walked back to living room, sat down, stared at nothing. I gave her my kidney, she said finally. I gave my biological mother, woman who abandoned me at birth and then let me marry my own brother. I gave her piece of my body to keep her alive. Yes, and she'll live 30 years with it. 30 years knowing she owes her life to daughter she threw away twice. Yes. Lindsay started laughing. It hurt incision, made tears stream down face, but she couldn't stop. Absurdity of it, cosmic irony, way her revenge had just become infinitely more complicated and devastating than anything she'd planned. What are you going to do? Diane asked. I don't know, let me think. But thinking was impossible. Brain kept circling back to same images, Chris's hands on her body, their wedding night, every intimate moment they'd shared, now retroactively transformed into something unspeakable, every failed pregnancy test, now revealed as perhaps mercy, biology, protecting them from consequences they'd been too ignorant to foresee. I need to see her, Lindsay said. Corbin. I need to hear her explain how she watched this happen and said nothing. Is that wise? You're 3 days post-surgery. You're in pain. This conversation could wait. It can't wait. It's already been 36 years too late. I'm doing this now. Diane drove her to Corbin's house. Same colonial revival where Lindsay had walked in to find Chris with Amber, where her marriage had ended in one devastating moment. Now it was about to become a place where she learned full scope of what her life had actually been. Corbin answered door herself, moving slowly but steadily. Kidney was working well. Lindsay could see it in her color, her posture, her eyes that were clear and alert instead of yellowed with toxicity. Lindsay, I wasn't expecting. You should be resting. Surgery. I know, Lindsay said. I know everything. Can we talk? Corbin's face went pale. She stepped back, letting Lindsay inside. They sat in living room, same room where this had all unfolded, where Amber had worn engagement ring and Chris had handed over divorce papers. When did you realize? Corbin asked quietly. Yesterday. Diane found adoption records. Lindsay's voice steady now, cold. You gave birth to me in March 1989, closed adoption. You gave me to family in Detroit and then you erased me from your life. Yes. And when Chris brought me home 8 years ago, I knew moment I saw you. You look exactly like my grandmother, her eyes, her mouth, way you tilt head when listening. I knew immediately who you were. And you said nothing. What was I supposed to say? Corbin's hands trembled in lap. That I'd given you up 36 years ago? That Chris had accidentally fallen in love with his half-sister? That I'd made choice when I was 23 and terrified and alone, and that choice had come back to destroy everything? Yes, that's exactly what you should have said. Moment you realized, you should have stopped it. I couldn't. Chris loved you. You were happy. I told myself it didn't matter, that half-siblings who don't grow up together don't have same... She stopped. I told myself it was fine. It wasn't fine. We tried for years to have children. Children that if we'd succeeded might have been... Lindsay couldn't finish. You let us try. You watched us fail month after month and never said word about why it might be failing. I didn't think you'd conceive. Genetic overlap, biological barriers. I thought nature would protect you from that consequence. That's not protection. That's cowardice. You let us live in ignorance rather than deal with your own guilt. They sat in silence. Outside, traffic moved past. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that inside this pristine house, mother and daughter were confronting truths that should never have existed. When you got sick, Lindsay said, when you needed donor, you knew I'd be perfect match, because I'm your biological daughter. Yes. And you let Chris test me anyway, let me volunteer, let me go through process thinking I was just wife trying to help mother-in-law, when really you were preparing to harvest organs from daughter you'd abandoned. I was dying, I was desperate, I wasn't thinking clearly about anything except surviving. Bullshit! Word came out sharp, vicious. You're retired judge. You spent 30 years analyzing complex situations and making rational decisions. You knew exactly what you were doing. You were using me. Again. Corbin's eyes filled with tears. You're right. I was using you. I told myself I was protecting you by hiding results when they came back as perfect match. That I was saving you from surgical risk. But really I was just terrified of you learning truth. Of Chris learning truth. Of everything collapsing. So you let Chris falsify my results. Let him leave me for Amber. Let me think I was incompatible when I was best match you'd ever find, because keeping your secrets was more important than my dignity. Yes. And then Amber's kidney failed and you were out of options and I still didn't know. Even when I agreed to donate, even when I set my terms, even when I was about to give you piece of my body, you never told me what I actually was to you. Would you have done it if you'd known? Lindsay thought about that. No. If I'd known you were my biological mother, I would have walked away and let you die with your secrets. So congratulations. Your lies saved your life. I'm sorry. Corbin's voice broke. I'm so deeply sorry. For giving you away, for not telling you when Chris brought you home, for letting you marry him, for using you when I needed kidney, for every single choice I made that hurt you. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo 8 years of unknowingly sleeping with my half-brother. Sorry doesn't erase fact that I gave you kidney that's going to keep you alive for 30 years while I carry this knowledge. I know. Do you? Do you understand that you don't just owe me your life? You owe me identity I can't have anymore. Past that makes sense. Marriage that wasn't incestuous. Mother who didn't abandon me twice. Lindsay stood, pain shooting through incision. You owe me everything. And 30 years from now, when you're still alive because my kidney is inside you, I want you to remember that. Every single day. She walked toward door. Corbin called after her. Are you going to tell Chris? Lindsay stopped, turned back. That's not my choice to make. That's yours. You created this situation. You kept these secrets. You decide if your son learns he married his sister. But understand this. Whatever you choose, I'm done. We don't speak again. We don't acknowledge each other. You're alive because of me, but you're nothing to me. Do you understand? Yes. Good. Lindsay left, got in Diane's car, stared straight ahead. Where to? Diane asked. Home. I need to lie down. I need to stop thinking. Her voice cracked. I need this to not be real. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't change biology. At home, Lindsay took pain medication and slept for 14 hours. When she woke, there was message from unknown number. This is Corbin. I told Chris. He knows everything now. He's devastated. He wanted me to tell you he's sorry for everything, including things neither of you knew were wrong at time. Lindsay deleted message without responding. She didn't want his apologies. She didn't want his devastation. She just wanted to rewind to moment before she'd walked into Dr. Okonkwo's office and offered to help, before she'd set in motion everything that had led to this, to learning that her entire adult life had been built on lie her own mother had created and maintained. But you couldn't rewind biology. You couldn't unknow what you'd learned. You could only survive it and figure out how to keep living with knowledge that should have destroyed you but somehow didn't. Somehow, impossibly, she was still here, still breathing, still moving forward, even though forward meant carrying this secret like stone in chest for rest of life. Even though forward meant she'd never trust anyone again, never believe in families, never assume that love was enough when biology could turn it into something unspeakable, forward anyway. Because what other choice was there? Chapter 8. The Reckoning confession went viral, but not for reasons Lindsay expected. Chris's admission of medical fraud was damning, but someone leaked information about unusual genetic compatibility. Within 24 hours, internet detectives started connecting dots. Lindsay watched from couch, recovering from surgery, phone in hand, as Reddit threads and Twitter speculation metastasized into theories, edging closer to truth. Donor and recipient statistically impossible to match unless related. 5-point match with that subtyping only happens with family, close family. So Chris Richards falsified wife's test results, and turns out wife was probably blood relative. This keeps getting darker. Media picked it up day 3. Carefully worded articles about genetic irregularities and questions about biological relationships. Reporters digging into Corbin's past, sealed adoption records, Lindsay's background. Diane called. We need to get ahead of this. Issue statement. Control narrative before someone breaks it wide open. No. Lindsay, if they find out, let them find out. Let everyone know what she did. That she gave me away and then let me marry my own brother. That she used me as organ donor without telling me what I was to her. Let whole world see exactly what kind of person she is. What about Chris? He didn't know. He participated in fraud. He falsified my results. He chose to destroy marriage rather than risk me. He doesn't get protected from consequences of who his mother is. And you? How do you get protected? Lindsay was quiet. I don't. I don't get protected from anything. I just get to survive it publicly and figure out how to build life from what's left. Story broke 4 days later. Investigative journalist with connections to sealed databases published full story. Corbyn's closed adoption 1989. Genetic evidence proving Lindsay was her biological daughter. Timeline showing Corbyn knew from moment Chris brought Lindsay home. Medical fraud taking on new dimensions once you understood it wasn't just about leaving wife, it was about weaponizing daughter. Public reaction was volcanic. Chris's original confession destroyed reputation. This revelation obliterated what was left. He became cautionary tale, symbol of unintentional incest, man who'd committed fraud without understanding full horror of what he was actually concealing. Corbyn fared worse. She wasn't dying woman manipulated by circumstances. She was mother who'd abandoned daughter and then harvested her for organs. She was judge who'd watched her children commit unknowing incest and said nothing. She was woman who'd built lies so complex they'd destroyed multiple lives. Within week, death threats started arriving at her house. Someone threw brick through window. Protesters showed up on lawn holding signs, child abandonment, organ harvester, judge of nothing. Police had to assign protective detail. And through it all, Lindsay said nothing publicly. She released one statement through Diane. I had no knowledge of my biological relationship to Richard's family until after kidney donation. I maintain that medical fraud committed against me was criminal regardless of genetic relationship. I ask for privacy during this difficult time. Privately, she watched destruction with cold satisfaction. This was what she'd wanted, for Corbyn and Chris to face consequences. But it was also horrible in ways she hadn't anticipated. Public dissection of her life, speculation about whether she'd ever suspected, comments about children she and Chris tried to have, about what might have resulted if they'd succeeded. My DNA is online now, she told therapist. My entire genetic history reduced to Reddit threads and Twitter speculation. People I've never met have opinions about my biology. How does that feel? Violating. Like I've been cut open again, but this time its entire identity being removed and examined and judged. Do you regret donation? Lindsay thought about that. She'd been asked that question so many times. Answer kept changing. I regret not knowing truth before I did it. I regret my mercy was built on lies. But action itself, saving life, even life that didn't deserve saving, I don't think I regret that. I regret cost of it. I regret who I had to become to survive it. But donation itself, that was one clean thing I did in all this, one choice that was entirely mine. Even though she's your biological mother? Especially because she's my biological mother, because it proves I can be better than people who created me. That biology doesn't determine who you are or how you act, that I can give life to someone who gave me away without becoming someone who abandons people. Lindsay paused. Does that make sense? Yes, it makes perfect sense. Criminal trial postponed pending investigation. Prosecutors revising charges, considering whether Corbyn's knowledge of biological relationship constituted additional fraud, whether Chris's lack of knowledge mitigated involvement. Diane thought they could reopen plea deal, negotiate harsher terms. Lindsay declined. I don't want to spend next year in courtrooms reliving this. I want it done. Let them serve probation. Let them live with what they did. That's punishment enough. Are you sure? I'm sure I'm tired. I'm sure I want to move forward. I'm sure revenge isn't making me feel any better, so I might as well stop pursuing it and focus on surviving instead. Chris tried to call. Lindsay blocked his number. He sent letters. She returned them unopened. Whatever he needed to process about unknowingly marrying half-sister, that was his burden. She had enough of her own. She did accept one call. From Amber. I saw news. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what you're going through. No one can. That's problem. There's no roadmap for this. Are you okay? No, but I will be. Eventually. I survived Chris's betrayal. I survived major surgery. I can survive this too. For what it's worth, I think you're strongest person I've ever met. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm held together with surgical tape and spite. Amber laughed softly. That's still stronger than most people manage. After they hung up, Lindsay sat with that. Maybe Amber was right. Maybe surviving when you wanted to collapse was its own form of strength. Maybe just getting through one more day without falling apart completely was enough. Her phone buzzed with news alert. Medical Ethics Board releases full report on Richard's case, calls for federal legislation on donor protection. They were using her story to change policy, to prevent other people from being manipulated way she'd been manipulated, her pain becoming purpose, trauma transforming into protection for others. That had to mean something, had to count for something beyond just personal survival. She opened laptop and started writing. Not statement, not response. Just her story, in own words, without lawyers filtering or media distorting, just truth as she'd lived it. Betrayal, surgery, discovery, cost. She wrote for 6 hours straight, ignoring pain inside, ignoring messages piling up, ignoring everything except need to turn this into something that mattered beyond just her own devastation. When she finished, she had 15,000 words. Manuscript that would become essay, then article, then eventually book. She sent it to literary agent who'd been trying to reach her for weeks. Here's my story, whole story, everything. Tell me if anyone will publish this. Agent responded in our, this is extraordinary, devastating but extraordinary. I have 3 publishers who'll want this. When can we talk? Lindsay looked at time, 7 at night. She'd spent entire day writing, hadn't eaten, hadn't taken medication, had just poured entire life onto page like bleeding into wound that couldn't clot. Tomorrow, she typed back, I need to rest. We'll talk tomorrow. She closed laptop, took medication, ate crackers because it was all she could manage, and went to bed. Downstairs, phone kept buzzing with messages and calls and endless noise of story that had gotten bigger than she could control. But up here, in dark, in bed, in space between sleeping and waking, she was just herself. Not news story, not victim, not symbol, just Lindsay Horan, 36 years old, post-surgery, living with knowledge that should have destroyed her but somehow hadn't, living. That was enough for today. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to do more than just survive, how to build something from wreckage, how to turn pain into purpose. But today surviving was victory enough. Chapter 9. The Woman in Pieces. 3 months after surgery, Lindsay stood at podium in front of 400 people. Medical ethicists, hospital administrators, policymakers. They'd come to hear about donor rights, medical manipulation, human cost of fraud. They'd come to hear Lindsay's story. But standing there looking at expectant faces, she found herself unable to deliver speech she'd prepared. Triumphant narrative, hero's journey, story of woman who'd survived betrayal and emerged stronger. Instead, she spoke truth. I gave my kidney to my biological mother who'd abandoned me at birth. I did it not knowing who she was, not knowing I'd spent 8 years married to my half-brother, not knowing my entire adult life had been built on lies she'd created and maintained. Room was silent. People want me to say I'm glad I did it, that donating was healing, that mercy was empowering. But truth is more complicated. I donated as weapon. I used my kidney to take everything from people who'd hurt me. And it worked. I won completely. She paused, looked down at notes, then back up. But truth is also that winning cost me things I didn't know I was spending. It cost me ability to trust my own motivations. It cost me belief that doing good makes you feel good. It cost me version of myself who could volunteer to help without calculating price. Her voice stayed steady, controlled. I'm standing here 3 months post-surgery, and I still don't know if what I did made me strong or if it just made me someone who can weaponize sacrifice. I don't know if I'm survivor or if I'm just someone too stubborn to break." Someone in third row started clapping. Then others joined. Not thunderous applause, more like acknowledgement, recognition of honesty rather than inspiration. After speech, people approached, not to congratulate, but to share their own stories of impossible choices, of doing hard things for complicated reasons, of surviving betrayals that should have destroyed them. "Thank you for not making it sound easy," one woman said. "Every other speaker makes it seem like surviving trauma is just about positive thinking and moving forward. But you made it sound real. It is real. Surviving hurts just as much as thing you're surviving from. But you're still here. That counts for something." Did it? Lindsay wasn't sure anymore. But she nodded anyway because this woman needed it to count, needed to believe her own survival was worth pain it cost her. Book was published 2 months later. The Cost of Mercy, one woman's journey through medical fraud, biological betrayal, and reluctant survival. It was not bestseller. Too dark for that, too unflinching in examination of revenge and cost. But it found its audience. People who'd been betrayed and didn't feel like heroes. People who'd survived and still felt broken. People who needed to know getting through it didn't require being transformed into someone better. Sometimes it just meant being someone different and figuring out how to live with that difference. Reviews were mixed. "Brutal honesty," said some. "Unnecessarily dark," said others. "This isn't feel-good survival story. It's autopsy of what survival actually costs. Not for everyone, but necessary for some." Lindsay didn't read most of them. She was too busy building Second Chance Initiative into something bigger than own story. They'd helped 37 people navigate complex medical decisions. They'd drafted model legislation for donor protection adopted in 8 states. They'd created blueprint for informed consent hospitals were beginning to implement. Her pain becoming policy. Trauma protecting strangers. That had to count for something, even if it didn't feel redemptive. Michael was still in her life. They'd moved in together cautiously. 2 people who'd learned trust was built in small acts repeated over time rather than grand gestures. He knew about her nightmares, ones where she was back on operating table, but this time they kept cutting, taking pieces until nothing left. He knew about days when she couldn't touch him because touch reminded her of Chris and everything that had been wrong about those 8 years. He knew about therapy appointments 3 times a week, medication for anxiety, ways she sometimes just needed silence, and he stayed anyway. Not because he was trying to fix her, but because he'd learned to exist beside someone in pieces without demanding they become whole. "Do you love him?" therapist asked. "I think so. Version of love that's more careful than before, less consuming, more sustainable." "Is that enough?" "I don't know if anything is enough anymore. I don't know if I'm capable of kind of love that doesn't have walls built into it. But this, what I have with Michael, feels real. Maybe that's better than enough." She hadn't spoken to Chris or Corbin since Revelation. Divorce was final. Financial settlement processed. They existed in different cities now, different lives, connected only by biology and history and kidney that kept Corbin alive with Lindsay's filtered blood. She thought about that sometimes, about piece of herself living in someone who'd spent entire life trying to get rid of her, about permanent biological connection that couldn't be severed even when every other connection had been destroyed. It should have felt like violation. Instead, it just felt like fact. Something that existed, that she'd chosen, that she had to live with whether she liked it or not. On 1-year anniversary of surgery, package arrived at Lindsay's house. Inside was handmade quilt, intricate, clearly representing hundreds of hours of work. Note read, "I made this for you. I can't apologize enough. I can't undo what I did. But I made something with my hands and thought of you with every stitch. You gave me life. I'm trying to figure out how to deserve it. Thank you. Kay." Lindsay held quilt long time. Then she folded it and put it in guest room closet. Not displayed, not thrown away, just acknowledged and set aside. Some gifts couldn't be accepted or rejected. They could only be stored in space between forgiveness and condemnation, held in reserve until you figured out what they meant. Maybe someday she'd take it out, drape it over couch, let it warm her while she read, let it be what it was. Beautiful thing made by someone trying to atone for being terrible person. Or maybe it would stay in closet forever. Reminder that some apologies were better left unaccepted because accepting them meant letting go of anger that felt safer to hold. She didn't know yet. She had time to decide. That evening, she and Michael cooked dinner together. Pasta, wine, music playing softly. Normal things that felt revolutionary after a year of crisis. "You seem different," he said. "Not happy exactly, but less heavy." "I'm tired of being heavy. Anger is exhausting. Grief is exhausting. I'm just tired of carrying it all." "Are you putting it down?" "I'm trying. Some of it's too attached to carry, but also too big to release. I'm just existing with it, making space for it to be there without letting it be everything." "That sounds healthy." "It sounds like survival. I don't know if it's healthy." They ate dinner, washed dishes, sat on couch watching movie neither paid attention to. Small domestic rituals that built lives out of ruins of lives that had come before. Later, lying in bed, Michael asleep beside her, Lindsay pressed hand against scar on side. It had faded to thin silver line, barely noticeable except in certain light. But she felt it constantly. Absence where kidney used to be, empty space that had healed but never filled. She'd given away piece of herself and somehow ended up more complete. Or maybe not complete. Maybe just more honest about being incomplete. About being person in pieces who was learning to function anyway. Her phone lit up with notification. Email from publisher. "Your book just won National Book Critics Circle Award for Memoir. Congratulations. This is huge." She read it twice, then turned off phone and went to sleep. Awards didn't change what happened. Success didn't erase trauma, but maybe turning pain into something that helped other people was enough. Maybe survival that protected strangers was its own form of redemption. Or maybe she was just making meaning where there wasn't any. Just telling herself stories to make cost bearable. Either way, she was here. Still breathing. Still moving forward, even when forward meant carrying knowledge most people couldn't imagine. Still trying. That had to count for something. Even if she never quite understood what. Chapter 10. The woman who survived 18 months post-surgery. Lindsay sat in her office reading a letter she'd written to herself the night before the donation. She'd found it in a drawer while looking for something else, forgotten until now. "Dear future self, by the time you read this, you'll have given away your kidney. You'll have saved someone who tried to destroy you. You'll have done something that makes no sense except as power, as strategy, as revenge disguised as mercy. I want you to know, I'm terrified. I'm not sure this is the right choice. I'm not sure I'm doing this for the right reasons. I'm not sure mercy and manipulation can coexist in the same action, but I'm doing it anyway because the alternative, letting her die, would make me someone I don't want to be. I hope you don't regret it. I hope the cost was worth whatever you gained. I hope you're stronger than I am right now, sitting in the dark the night before surgery, wondering if I'm about to make the worst mistake of my life. Be kind to me if I was wrong. Remember, I did the best I could with what I knew. Love, past self." Lindsay read it twice. Then she picked up a pen and wrote a response on the back of the same page. "Dear past self, you were right to be terrified. The cost was enormous. You lost things you didn't know you had, the ability to trust easily, the belief that good deeds feel good, the version of yourself who could help without calculating price. You gained things too, a voice people listen to, a platform for change, the certainty that you can survive anything because you already survived this. Was it worth it? I still don't know. Some days yes, some days no. Most days it's both. Worth it and devastating, empowering and destructive, the best and worst thing you ever did. But you're still here. That's what matters. You survived the surgery, the betrayal, the revelation that your entire life was built on lies. You survived learning you'd married your half-brother and donated a kidney to your biological mother who'd abandoned you twice. You survived publicity and judgment and the destruction of everything you thought you knew about yourself. You survived. That's the only victory that matters. Don't regret the donation. Regret is wasted energy. You did what you did for reasons that made sense at the time. The fact that you learned devastating truths afterward doesn't change the purity of your original intention to save a life, to prove you were better than your worst impulses, to weaponize mercy in a way that gave you power. You got your power, but you paid for it with pieces of yourself you can't get back. That's the trade. That's always the trade. Live with it. Live anyway. That's all any of us can do. Love future self. She folded both letters together and put them back in the drawer. Evidence of transformation. Proof that the woman who'd written the first letter and the woman who'd responded were not the same person. That afternoon she had lunch with Amber. They'd stayed in touch. Occasional texts, phone calls every few months. The tentative friendship of two women connected by shared trauma. "You look better," Amber said. "Less like you're about to shatter. I feel less fragile. Not strong, exactly, just less likely to break." That's progress. Is it? Or is it just numbness masquerading as healing? Does it matter? You're functioning. You're helping people. You're in a relationship. You wrote a book that's changing policy. Whether you call it healing or numbness, you're doing the work of living. Lindsay thought about that. Maybe Amber was right. Maybe the label didn't matter as much as the action. Maybe being someone who survived was enough, even if you never became someone who thrived. "How are you?" Lindsay asked. "Good. Really good, actually. The non-profit is growing. I met someone, a woman who gets the recovery thing, who doesn't need me to be perfect. I'm happy. It's weird. I didn't think I'd get to be happy after everything that happened. You deserve happy. So do you. Maybe. Someday. Right now, I'm just aiming for stable." They finished lunch. Hugged goodbye. Promised to stay in touch. Walking back to her car, Lindsay's phone buzzed. An email from a university. "Would you be interested in a teaching position? Ethics in Medicine program. Starting next fall. We'd be honored to have you." She forwarded it to Michael. "Thoughts?" He responded immediately. "Do it. You'd be great. Plus Professor Lindsay has a nice ring to it." That evening she accepted the position. Started imagining a future where she taught students about donor rights, informed consent, the ethics of medical decision-making. Where she turned her pain into education, her trauma into training for the next generation. It wasn't redemption, but it was purpose. And purpose was enough when redemption felt impossible. A week later, she received a letter, not from Chris or Corbin, from Dr. Okonkwo. "Dear Ms. Horan, I'm writing from a place of profound regret. My medical license is permanently revoked. My career is over. My family has struggled with the consequences of my choices. I lost everything because I helped an old friend commit fraud against you. I'm not writing to ask forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing because I need you to know your kidney is functioning at 99% capacity in Mrs. Richards' body. It's the most successful transplant I've ever been associated with. The genetic compatibility was unprecedented. Your sacrifice, however complicated the motivations, gave her decades of life she wouldn't have had. I know that doesn't matter to you. I know you didn't do it for her gratitude or my redemption, but I wanted you to know anyway. Medical outcomes matter. Lives saved matter. Even when everything else is complicated and painful, that matters. I'm sorry for what I did. For the rest of my life, I'll be sorry. James Okonkwo." Lindsay read the letter once, then filed it away. Another apology. Another person trying to make sense of the disaster they'd helped create. She didn't respond. There was nothing to say. That night, lying in bed, Michael asleep beside her, Lindsay thought about Dr. Okonkwo's words. Lives saved matter. Did they? Did saving a life that had tried to destroy yours matter? Did mercy given to the undeserving count as mercy, or just as strategy? She didn't know. Might never know. But she'd made the choice, and now she lived with it. The empty space where her kidney used to be, the scar tissue that would never fully fade, the knowledge that somewhere across the city, her biological mother was breathing because of her. And maybe that was enough. Not beautiful, not redemptive, just true. She pressed her hand against her scar one final time, then rolled over and went to sleep. In the morning, she'd wake up and continue building her life, teaching, advocating, loving carefully, surviving one day at a time. She'd spend the rest of her life carrying this story, the betrayal, the surgery, the revelation, the cost. She'd never be the woman she was before it happened. That woman was gone, replaced by someone harder and wiser and more damaged. But she'd survived. Against odds that should have destroyed her, she'd survived. And someday, maybe decades from now, she'd look back on this time and understand what it all meant. Why she'd made the choices she'd made, whether they'd been right or wrong or just human. But for now, she'd just keep breathing, keep moving, keep trying to be someone worth being. That was all anyone could do. Survive the unsurvivable and figure out how to keep living with what survival cost you. Some days that felt like defeat. Most days it felt like nothing at all. But occasionally, just occasionally, it felt like the kind of quiet victory that nobody wrote stories about. The kind that happened in the space between sleeping and waking, when you realized against all odds you'd made it through another day intact enough to try again tomorrow. And maybe that was the only kind of victory that actually mattered, the kind you survived to see. The end.